Throughout the semester, I have grown significantly as a writer, gaining skills in crafting clear arguments, weaving evidence effectively, and creating strong analyses. By closely examining and reflecting on native speaker anthem in the poem This Is Water, I have not only expanded on my technical writing abilities, but also developed my creative voice. Through my detailed journal entries, I can demonstrate the progress and highlight the specific examples of how my writing has evolved to become more precise, insightful, and evidence-driven. In this journal conference, over the course of this semester, I've worked to improve my skills as a writer, engaging deeply with the texts we've studied and challenging myself to articulate my thoughts more clearly and effectively. In this conference, I will discuss how analyzing works like Native Speaker, Anthem, and the poem This Is Water has helped me grow as a writer. I'll be using specific journal entries to highlight moments where I've developed critical writing skills such as weaving textual evidence, analyzing themes, and avoiding summary to focus on the original analysis. By the end of this conference, I hope to show how I've grown as a writer using the evidence I've piled up throughout this semester. One of the most significant ways I've grown as a writer is by learning how to analyze complex themes and ideas in literature. This growth is particularly evident on my work in Native Speaker by Chang-Rae Lee. Earlier in the semester, I struggled with identifying deeper themes in text, often focusing too much on the plot and summary. However, in my journal entry on entry 20, A Turning Point, in this entry, I explored how the protagonist Henry navigates his dual identity as a Korean American, focusing specifically on the symbolism of the language in the novel. For example, in entry 20, I wrote about how Henry's struggles with language reflect his inner conflict. He often feels like an outsider in both his personal and professional life, and Lee uses the metaphor of broken English to symbolize his disconnection. In this journal entry on entry 20, I noted Henry's inability to fully express himself in either Korean or English mirrors his fragmented sense of identity. This is evident in scenes where he avoids to keep conversations with his wife Lilia out of fear of saying the wrong thing. Reflecting on this, I learned how to connect specific textual details to broader themes, which strengthened my analytical writing. Later, in entry 23, I expanded on this idea by examining how Lee uses dialogue to reveal character dynamics. For example, in entry 23, I analyzed a tense conversation between Henry and Lilia, where she accuses him of being emotionally distant. In my journal, I wrote, Lilia's accusation that Henry is a spy in their own marriage highlights his professional role in undercover agent bleeds into his personal life, preventing him from forming authentic connections. This analysis helped me understand the importance of focusing on strong textual details to support larger arguments, a skill I've since adopted to other texts. Another area where I've seen significant growth is in my ability to craft clear arguments and support them with well-chosen evidence. This skill is particularly evident in my journal entries on Anthem by Ayn Rand. Initially, I struggled with balancing my personal interpretations of the text with evidence from the book. However, in my entry 25, I focused on how Rand's use of language reinforces the theme of individuality. In entry 25, I analyzed the protagonist's discovery of the word I and its symbolic significance. I wrote the protagonist's repeated use of we throughout the novel represents the oppressive collectivism of his society. When he finally discovers the word I, it marks a pivotal moment of self-realization and freedom. This analysis taught me how to use specific textual moments to build a clear argument. Furthermore, in entry 27, I explored how Rand's imagery reinforces her philosophical ideas. For example, I analyzed the scene where the protagonist equality sees his reflection for the first time. In my journal, I noted the mirror symbolizes self-awareness and individuality by describing the protagonist's awe of his own reflection. Rand emphasizes the importance of self-discovery and rejecting collectivist ideology. Reflecting on these entries, I've learned how to identify key moments in text and use them to support my arguments effectively. A third area of growth has been learning to avoid summary and focus on creating original and insightful analyses. This was a challenge for me early in the semester, but on David Foster Wallace's This Is Water demonstrates how I've improved. In entry 30, I focused on Wallace's use of repetition to emphasize his central message about the importance of perspective. In this entry 30, I wrote, Wallace repeats phrases like default setting and this is water to remind the audience that perspective shapes our understanding of the world. This representation serves as a rhetorical device, encouraging readers to reflect on their own mental frameworks. By focusing on Wallace's rhetorical techniques, I was able to move beyond summary and offer a deeper analysis of the text. Additionally, in entry 32, I examined how Wallace uses anecdotes to encourage the reader. I wrote, Wallace's story about the men in the grocery line illustrates his point about perspective in a relatable way. By showing how easily we fall into self-centered thinking, he challenges readers to adopt a more empathetic view of the world. Reflecting on this entry, I realized the importance of engaging creatively with the text to offer unique insights rather than merely summarizing the content. As the semester progressed, I began to synthesize the skills I developed while working on each text. This is particularly evident in my later journal entries where I combined analytical depth, strong arguments, and creative engagement. For example, on one of my later entries, 35, I revised native speaker to analyze how Lee uses setting to reflect Henry's inner turmoil. I wrote, the cold, sterile environment of Henry's office mirrors his emotional detachment, while the warmth of his childhood home represents the cultural identity he longs to reconnect with. This synthesis of textual analysis and thematic interpretation shows how I've grown as a writer. Similarly, on my last entry 36, I reflected on Anthem and This Is Water, comparing how both texts address the theme of individuality. I wrote, while Rand celebrates individuality as means of rejecting oppression, Wallace focuses on individual choice as a way to foster empathy and understanding. Both authors emphasize the power of perspective, but they approach it from two different angles. This comparison allowed me to connect ideas across texts, demonstrating my ability to think critically and write cohesively about complex themes. In conclusion, my growth as a writer this semester has been marked by significant improvements in analytical precision, originality, and evidence-based writing. Through journal entries like 22, 25, 28, 31, 34, and 36, I have documented my journey from the basic interpretation of analysis. Each entry reflects a key milestone in my development, whether it's learning the structure my arguments more effectively, crafting engaging and original perspectives, or integrating textual evidence seamlessly. What stands out the most to me is how these improvements have enhanced my ability to connect with the text on a deeper level. Writing is no longer just an academic exercise, but it's a way for me to engage with the ideas, questions, assumptions, and to express my own voice on the text, and so I can have my own original and unique take on the evidence presented in front of me. For example, my revised analysis of native speakers' narrative structure in entry 22 helped me understand the complexity of Henry Park's identity, while my exploration of Wallace's rhetorical strategies in This Is Water allowed me to appreciate the power of language to shape thought. Looking ahead, I aim to build this foundation by continuing to refine my writing skills and explore new ways of engaging with the literature. The semester has shown me that growth as a writer is a continuous process and something that can't all just be learned at one time. and I'll continue to use these skills so I'm able to continue to succeed in AP Literature.